Hello, and welcome to the Stage 36 About the Language 1 review. We're going to talk about the present active subjunctive. So, you're going to remember that there are four conjugations of verbs. First conjugation verbs like porto, portare, carry, and you can tell that they're first conjugation verbs because they have a long A in that second principal part. Dokeo dokere, to teach, that's a second conjugation verb because it has a long E right there in the second principal part. Traho trahere, that's a third conjugation verb with a short E right there in the second principal part. And audio audire, to hear, that's a fourth conjugation verb, and you can tell because it has a long I right there in the second principal part. So first conjugation, second conjugation, third conjugation, and fourth conjugation. And you can tell by looking at the second principal part. So first we're going to talk about the present indicative active of all four conjugations as a review. Remember the present indicative active, I carry or I'm carrying, right? So we'll start with porto. And remember the present indicative active, we're going to take the stem from that second principal part and we're going to add the personal endings. They show you what person the verb is. O, S, T, mus, tis, nt. And so in this first conjugation verb, the long A from the second principal part, you can see it there and there and there. But final T and NT will always shorten the vowel that comes before them. So in the third person singular and the third person plural, it's a short A. And this final O actually makes the A disappear. It disappears there. Okay, so we end up with porto, portas, portat, portamus, portatis, portant. In the second conjugation, we're going to take this stem from the second principal part and put on those same OST, mus, tis, nt personal endings. And again, the long E is going to shorten before final T and NT. It sticks around before the O, but it does get shortened as well. Okay? Third conjugation. Third conjugation's the tricky conjugation. There's the stem, trahe, and it's tricky because that short E is pretty unstable. So, before the long O, it disappears. But before the other endings, it changes. So, before S and T and mus and tis, it changes to a short I. And then before the NT, Latin does not like an int ending, so it changes to a U to give us unt. So traho, trahis, trahit, trahimus, trahitis, trahunt. Finally, the fourth conjugation. So there's our stem from the second principal part with the long I. And because it's a nice long vowel, it sticks around, although it does get shortened before the final O. And it gets shortened before the final T, just like you'd expect. And then before NT, Latin doesn't like an int ending, so we stick in this U. So audio, audis, audit, audimus, auditus, audiunt. So that's the whole present indicative active of all four conjugations. We're also going to review the future indicative active. I will carry or I will be carrying. So for a first conjugation verb, we take that stem and we add the tense sign, the future tense sign bi, and then we add the OST, mus, tis, and T endings we were just seeing. Now this short I disappears before the long O, And Latin doesn't like an int ending, so it turns to a U there in the third person plural. So what we end up with is bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitus, bunt. Those are the future indicative active endings for the first conjugation. And for the second conjugation, we're going to use them again, except now they're attached to a second conjugation stem. So instead of a long A, we have a long E right there, docebo, docebus. The third and fourth conjugation, though, form their future indicative active differently. So instead of the OST, mustis, NT endings, we have MST, mus, tis, nt. And we've seen this M as a personal ending for the first person singular before. You see it in the imperfect of the verb to be, aram, aras, arat. And you see it in the imperfect endings for all regular verbs, bomb, bas, bot. So this M ending is not a surprise. But instead of the B tense sign, we have an A or long E tense sign. We use the A here in the first person singular, and then we use the long E elsewhere. But remember, the long E is going to get shortened before final T and NT. So we get traham, I will drag, trahace, you will drag, trahet, he will drag, trahamus, we will drag, trahatus, y'all will drag, trahent, they will drag. Okay, so A and then E. So that's the future of traho. The tense sign is A or long E. The tense sign is also A long E for the fourth conjugation, but now we're adding it to this stem with the long I, and that long I, that's tough, so it sticks around. So we end up with audiam, audiace, audiat, audiamus, audiatus, audient. That I is there throughout. So here's our mnemonic for the future indicative active of all four conjugations. It's bo, bi, boo in 1 and 2, a, then e in 4 and 3. Another mnemonic is, let's see, ham and 5 eggs. Okay, so that's the future indicative active, and these are the ones that are most likely to cause you trouble. The first and second conjugation endings, they're pretty easy to recognize. All of this brings us to the present subjunctive active, because here too we're going to have to be really careful about conjugation. So this mnemonic, we eat caviar, helps us remember the vowels that we're going to use in the first conjugation, the second conjugation, the third conjugation, and the fourth conjugation for the present subjunctive. So let's look at a first conjugation verb. So we eat caviar. So we're going to use the long E for the first conjugation, and we're going to use the MST, mus, tis, NT personal endings. Put that long E in front, but remember it'll get shortened by final M, T, and NT. And here you have the present subjunctive active of porto. So portem, portes, portet, portamus, portatus, portent. Now let's go to the second conjugation. So again, we eat caviar, so E long A. So here's our E long A, except it gets shortened before final M, T, and NT. So we end up with dokeam, dokeas, dokeat, dokeamus, dokeatus, dokeant. the present subjunctive active of a second conjugation verb. So we eat caviar. So for the third conjugation, we're going to use that long A. So there's our personal endings, right? And then we have the long A before it, except it gets shortened in the first person singular before that final M, and here before the final T, and there before the final NT. So there's your present subjunctive active of a third conjugation verb. Traham, trahas, trahat, trahamas, trahatis, trahan. Now, if you've been paying careful attention, though, you might have noticed that this form here, the first person singular of the present subjunctive active, looks exactly like the first person singular of the future indicative active. This is true for all third conjugation verbs. This form here is ambiguous. It can be future indicative active or present subjunctive active. Now we eat, again, caviar. So now we're at the fourth conjugation. So we're going to use this I long A before those same personal endings. So we've got our I long A, and it's shortened before final M, T, and NT. So that gives us the present subjunctive active of fourth conjugation verb, audiam, audias, audia, audiamus, audiatus, audiant. And again, if you've been paying attention, you'll recognize this form here. It's true for the third conjugation. It's true for the fourth conjugation. The first person singular, present subjunctive active, looks just exactly like the first person singular, future indicative active. So context is going to have to tell you the difference. It's an ambiguous form. So conjugation really, really matters. I've put a bunch of verb forms here. Okay, we have present indicative active. Those are all present indicative active. These are all future indicative active. These are all present subjunctive active. So if you see, for example, a long A, for a first conjugation verb like porto, that's a sign of present indicative active. But with all these verbs, second conjugation, third conjugation, fourth conjugation, the long A is a sign of present subjunctive active. So similarly, if you see a long E, well, in the first conjugation, that's a sign of present subjunctive active. In the second conjugation, it's a sign of present indicative active. And in the third and fourth conjugations, that's a sign of future indicative active. Here's another set. Again, present indicative active, future indicative active, present subjunctive active. Right? So if you see an A, right, that means present indicative active for a first conjugation verb, but it's going to turn up in the present subjunctive active in the second, third, and fourth conjugations. Again, E appears in the present subjunctive active for a first conjugation verb like porto, in the present indicative active for a second conjugation verb like dokeo, but in the future indicative active for third and fourth conjugation verbs like traho and audio. So when you see a verb, if you don't recognize right away which conjugation it belongs to, first, second, third, or fourth, then you need to look up its principal parts and look at that second principal part and figure out what conjugation it is. So now that we have all these forms of the present subjunctive, what can we do with them? Well, we can do with them all the same kinds of things that we already know how to do with the imperfect subjunctive. So let's look at some of the things that we already know how to do. Purpose clauses. So here's a purpose clause that we could already do. Regina milites mitebat ut illi orbem delerent. The queen was sending soldiers in order that they might destroy the city. So mitebat there is imperfect indicative, and this is our result clause here, and it has this imperfect subjunctive. Well, now here I've got another result clause. Regina milites mitit ut illi orbem deleant. The queen sends soldiers in order that they may destroy the city. So here I have a present tense verb in my main clause. And because I have a present tense verb in my main clause and not a past tense verb, an imperfect or a perfect or a pluperfect, instead of an imperfect subjunctive here in the purpose clause, I'm going to have a present subjunctive. Okay, so because I've got a present tense verb here, I'm going to have a present subjunctive instead of an imperfect subjunctive there. The queen sends soldiers in order that they may destroy the city. Look at one more. Here you can see I've put in a future tense verb. Okay? Regina milites mittat. The queen will send soldiers ut illi orbem deleant in order that they may destroy the city. Again, a present subjunctive there. Okay? So if the verb in the main clause is present or future perfect, then we're going to have a present subjunctive where we used to have, when we had a past tense verb of some sort in the main clause, where we used to have an imperfect subjunctive. And this is going to be true of all the kinds of clauses we know. So here's a relative clause of purpose, right? It's like a purpose clause, except it's introduced not by ut or in a negative purpose clause, nay, but by some sort of relative clause or maybe even an ubi, right? So, Regina milites mitebat qui orbem servarent. The queen was sending soldiers in order that they might protect the city. So we have an imperfect indicative there in our main clause for our main verb. So we have an imperfect subjunctive there. Okay, past tense here, imperfect subjunctive there. Change it up a little bit. Regina milites mittit qui orbem servent. Present tense here, present subjunctive there. The queen sends soldiers in order that they may protect the city or to protect the city. Let's do it with a future tense verb. Regina milites mittet. The queen will send soldiers. Again, we're going to have a present subjunctive here. In order that they may protect the city or to protect the city. So if you have a present or some sort of future tense in your main clause, you're going to have a present subjunctive where you used to have an imperfect subjunctive. Indirect commands. I've got 3 of them here. This one has past tense verb, so it has an imperfect subjunctive. Present tense, present subjunctive. Future tense, present subjunctive. So this first one, Regina militibus imperavit ut orbem invenirent. The queen ordered the soldiers to find the city. Now here's one with a present tense main verb. Regina militibus imperat ut orbem inveniat. The queen orders the soldiers to find the city. Now I've put in this future tense verb. Regina militibus imperabit ut orbem inveniant. The queen will order the soldiers to find the city. Okay? Now let's look at some indirect questions. So our first example here has a main verb in a past tense. Here it's the imperfect. So I was asking which dog you were seeking. So we have a main verb in a past tense, and the seeking is happening same time as that verb. I was asking which dog you were seeking while I was asking you. So that's going to be an imperfect subjunctive, and we've been doing that for a while. Now, rogo, present tense main verb. I am asking which dog you are seeking. So now that we have a present tense main verb to indicate same time as that verb, seeking happening same time as the asking, we're going to use a present subjunctive. Even if we change this to a future tense main verb, I will ask which dog you are seeking. Same time as that main verb. So we're going to use a present subjunctive. So when you have a present or future tense main verb and the action in your indirect question is happening same time as that verb, you're going to use a present subjunctive, just like you used to use an imperfect subjunctive in that same situation when you had a past tense main verb. One last kind of clause, result clauses. And you remember result clauses, often there's a trigger word in the main clause. Tom, ita, seek, tantus, talis, tot, or adeo. Those are our trigger words. And here we have a Tom, right? Equus erat Tom pulcher ut eam statim emerem. The horse was so beautiful that I bought him immediately. So we have an imperfect main verb here. So in our result clause, the buying is happening same time as, or maybe subsequent to, after that main verb. So we're going to use an imperfect subjunctive. We already knew how to do that. So now we're going to change it up a little bit and we're going to put in a present tense main verb. Equus est tam pulcher ut eam statim emam. The horse is so beautiful that I am buying him immediately. So now that we have a present tense main verb to indicate same time as or subsequent to that main verb, we're going to use a present subjunctive here. Same thing is going to happen if we have a future tense main verb. Equus ne erit tam pulcher ut eam statim emas. So the action in this result clause is happening same time as, or perhaps subsequent to that main verb. So we're going to use a present subjunctive. In this situation where the action inside the clause is happening same time as or subsequent to the main verb, if our main verb's in a past tense, we're going to use an imperfect subjunctive. If our main verb is in a present or future tense, we're going to use a present subjunctive. There you go.